We'll get to that in a moment. But before I begin with rainbows, let me ask you if you have any questions of a halachic nature that you wish to begin with. All is well? Okay, let me get this stuff on the screen. Maybe. Um, all of the halachas of rainbow, keshet in Hebrew, are of course based on the verses in Sefer Breshit. What it says, everyone knows the story in Sefer Breshit. There was the flood, and after the flood, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a rainbow, a keshet, as a brit, as a sign of the covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not destroy the world again. V'haya ba'anani anan al haaretz nirta keshet anan. After the flood, the the keshet, the rainbow, was seen in the clouds, and that's an important point to remember because soon we're going to be speaking about what happens if you see a rainbow somewhere else in a reflection in the water or somewhere but not in the clouds. We're going to come to that when we talk about the halachas. Zacharti et britzi, and Kodesh Baruch Hu says he's reminded of the bris, of the covenant, that lo yiyeh od hamayim lemabul l'shachet kol basar. There will not be another mabul, another flood to destroy the whole world. Okay, that's the basis of the discussion in Sefer Breshit. Now let's see what the Talmudic sources have to say, and then we'll trace it down through the generations to modern times. The Gemara says, and as usual, I'm not going to bother mentioning exactly where I take the sources from because you have the sources exactly on the screen if you want to look them up and see what my mistakes are. I'm not a good typist. I'm a Rabbi Alexandria. I'm a Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The great rabbi said, Haro'eh et hakeshet. Someone who sees a rainbow in the clouds, tzarich sheyipol al panav, must fall upon your face, you must prostrate yourself. Bow down, more than bow down, prostrate yourself flat out on the ground. Why? Rashi explains, Lefi shehu mareh kvod Hashem, because what you are seeing in the rainbow is the appearance of the kvod Hashem. How does Rashi know that? Rashi knows that because in the first parak, in the opening chapter of Sefer Yecheskel, Yecheskel Hanavi has a vision, a mystical vision, a profoundly mystical vision, in which he sees the divine chariot. Well, read all about it in the first chapter of Yecheskel. And one of the many things that Yecheskel Hanavi points out when he sees Kavod Hashem is that he sees multicolored. He sees a spectrum of colors like a rainbow. So if in Yecheskel the prophet, in his mystical vision, when he saw the glory of Hashem, when he saw Kavod Hashem, what he saw was a spectrum of colors. So if you see the spectrum of colors in a rainbow, you are seeing Kavod Hashem, you should prostrate yourself flat out on the ground. Now, let me make one important observation regarding mystical visions. And the comment I'm about to make regarding mystical visions, and the oldest one we have is the first chapter of Yeskel, which is a profoundly mystical vision. One of the characteristics of mysticism, one of the characteristics of mystical literature throughout its length and breadth is the underlying idea that language is unable to convey the profound truth of mysticism. The mystical vision is an experience. If you experience it, or if you have experienced it, you know what the mystical experience is. You know what the mystical vision is. If you have not experienced it yourself, human language is unable to explain fully. Let me give you a trivial example, and you'll understand what it is I'm talking about. Here's a trivial example. Imagine that you are reading a novel. Oh, you don't read novels, of course. Imagine that someone is reading a novel. Oh, you don't even know what a novel is. It's a work of fiction, just totally made up, falsehoods. And in this novel, the hero of the novel uh, strides into a bar, and he walks right up to the bar, and he pounds his hand onto the bar, and he says to the barmaid, he says to the barkeep, "A double whiskey, please." He doesn't say please. He says double whiskey, and he's provided with a double whiskey, which he downs in a single gulp. He pounds the glass onto the bar and says, "Another one." And another double whiskey he downs in a single gulp. Three double whiskeys. And now the telephone in the corner of the bar rings. Someone answers it and calls out, "Telephone call for Joe Schmo. Is there a Joe Schmo here?" And that's our hero. And the novelist tells us that Joe Schmo turns around slowly and walks dizzily to the telephone. Now, anyone who has ask anyone who has experienced drunkenness. I know this doesn't apply to you personally, but ask anyone who has experienced drunkenness, and he or she will be happy to tell you that he or she understands exactly the experience of Joe Schmo walking dizzily to the telephone. Someone who has never experienced drunkenness doesn't get it. Someone who's never experienced drunkenness just thinks that the guy was dizzy. That's all. Well, human language is unable to convey precisely what the experience is. Well, that's a trivial example, but you got the idea. And, and therefore, and therefore, mystical writing tends very strongly in two directions. Number one, first direction, which you see over and over and over again in the first parak of Sefer Yecheskel, since Yecheskel Hanavi is unable to express in human language what he experienced in his mystical vision of the Merkavah, the divine chariot, uh, the word kemo, or the prefix k, appears over and over and over and over again. I saw something like this. I saw something like that. I saw something like this. I saw something like that. Well, that's the best he can do, is to give a simile, approximate what it is that he experienced. That's one direction that mystical literature commonly takes. This second direction is the poetic direction. Poetry, well, poetry is many things. I mean, one of the elements of poetry is the poet's attempt to convey to you something more than the words say. Since poetry, among other things, is an attempt to convey to you more than the words say, a feeling, an experience of what the words are driving at. So mystical literature is often poetic or chock full of similes. So of course, when Rashi explains that Yechezkel Hanavi saw a spectrum of colors like a rainbow, doesn't mean literally like that. If you ever have the mystical experience of seeing the Merkava, the divine chariot, then you will know what Yechezkel Hanavi was referring to. Well, the verse in Yechezkel says, Ki Maria Keshet. Notice the Ki. Ki Maria Keshet. What Yechezkel saw was like, similar to the spectrum of a rainbow. Asher yeh ba'anan b'yom geshem, the kind of rainbow which occurs after the rain, and that was Demut, Kvod Hashem. Again, Demut. That was similar. That was as if an image of the divine. The Epol al Panai, and of course, when Yechezkel Navi perceived Kvod Hashem, of course, he prostrated himself. He bowed down and prostrated himself, and therefore, according to Rav Alexandria Amar Rav Yoshua ben Levi, that is what we are to do today if we see a rainbow. Well, he was in Babylonia when he said this, of course. Light Allah b'ma'arava. In the West, in Eretz Yisrael, when they heard this, when they heard what Rav Alexandri said, they cursed him. They were very unhappy with this statement of Rav Alexandri. They cursed him. Why? Mishum demechse command sogid lakashta. Because if you prostrate yourself when you see a rainbow, it looks like you are bowing down and worshiping the rainbow. It isn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just an image. It's just a kimo. It's just a keilu. It isn't really. And therefore, if you bow down to it, almost you prostrate yourself flat out on the ground, that looks like you're worshiping the rainbow. Absolutely not. The rabbis in the West, the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael said, and they cursed him, light, Ale. They cursed him for having said such a thing. Aval, bruche vade mevorich. But there is a bracha to be pronounced when you see a rainbow. Chas v'sholem. Heaven forbid that you should bow down, but you should recite a bracha. My mevorich, the Gemara asks, what's the blessing? Baruch zocher abris. Now, over and over, we're going to see later that there's going to be a machlokas over and over again. The Gemara, when it gives us the text of a bracha, leaves off the full beginning. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. That part is routinely omitted when the Gemara gives us the text of a bracha, and later on this morning, that's going to raise the question: are we supposed to insert that Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam? Are we supposed to insert that before Zocher Habrit or not? We're going to see a machlokas on that coming up later. B'masni Satana, when they were learning the Mishnah, they learned Rabbi Yishmael ben Osh or Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. The great rabbi said the text of the bracha should be Ne'aman bebriso kayam b'ma'amaro. So we have two opinions about what the correct text of the bracha is. Aside from the beginning, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, should it end Zocher Abris, or should it end Ne'aman bebriso kayam b'ma'amaro? How should it end? Well, Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Beit Yosef quotes the Avudraham, one of the great Spanish Rishonim, who says that the Rosh was asked what the correct text of the bracha is. Eich mistaklim bekeshet, keshem avachim. Is it correct to look at the rainbow when you make the bracha? Oh, I'm reading. The Gemara teaches us in another tractate in Chagiga, hamistakel bekeshet einav kehot. The Gemara teaches us that if you look at a rainbow, you're going to lose your vision. Your eyes are going to get weak, and you will lose your vision if you look at a rainbow. Well, we don't want that to happen. So they asked the Rosh, How can you look at a rainbow? You have to see it to make the bracha, but how can you look at it when you're not supposed to look at it because it ruins your vision? Hey, Shiv, the Rosh answered, Ein mistakel k'roeh. They're two different things. There's roeh and mistakel. Well, what's the difference between roeh and mistakel? Mistakel means a passing glance. Roeh means a gaze, looking steadily. So according to the Gemara, you should just have a mistakel, just a passing glance at the rainbow, not ro'eh. You should not look at it carefully. You should not gaze at it. Just a passing glance is all. Ki mistakel mosifu medakdek b'habato yoter min ro'eh. I just said it backwards. The ro'eh is the passing one. The mistakel is the gaze. And bottom line, just look at it for a moment. That's the approach of Rabbi Yosef Karo. However, Rabbeinu Hananel was one of the first of the Rishonim. Sort of, he was right at the period, the cusp of history when the period of the Gaonim in Babylonia ended, and the period of the Rishonim in Spain began. He was right at that period. So he could be considered a Gaon. He could be considered from the Gaonic period. He can be considered from the period of the Rishonim in Spain. Most people just would categorize him as one of the earliest Spanish Rishonim. And he says, Omer Kagon ze Demut Hashem. He says that if you refer to the pasuk in Yecheskel, you see a rainbow. If upon seeing the rainbow, you refer to the pasuk, you quote or you talk about the pasuk in Yecheskel, that the vision of Yecheskel was similar to Kvod Hashem, that's what you should not do. You should not say anything which might imply that you have a vision of God, that you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's continue surveying the Rishonim. Ramban wrote as follows. The Psukim teach us that the Keshet is a siman, a sign of the Brit, the covenant between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and mankind, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to flood the world again and destroy everything. If you want to know how it's possible for the Keshet, for the rainbow, to be a symbol of the Brit, to symbolize the covenant, Hine Hukatam, it's just like many other examples. Here are a few other examples of physical things which represent Britot, which represent covenants, which represent undertakings. Eid Hagal Hazeh ve'eda matzeva im ani avor elecha et Hagal Hazeh. Back in the days when the Avot were dividing up the territory and making borders between people's territory, well, they made a gal, a pile of rocks, and they said, this gal, this pile of rocks, shall be a sign of the covenant, that I will not trespass on your property, and you will not trespass on my property. Well, you see, a physical thing, a pile of rocks, can represent an agreement, an undertaking, which both sides have agreed to. Here's another example. V'yomer ki et sheva kvasot tikach miyadi ba'avur tiyeh li le'eda ki hafarti et ha'be'er hazot. If the question is keeping track of who dug which well back in the days of the Avos, and who therefore has the right to take the water out of the well, well, they had a physical sign, the kvasot, which represented the undertaking that only I and my people will be allowed to use this well. Ki kol davar hanirah sheyusam lifnei shnayim, any physical object which is established between two parties, that is called an oat, that is called a symbol of a bris. Haskamak bris, that's called a symbol of the covenant. We even find it in bris milah. Nemaltem et besar olatchem v'haya la'ot bris. The circumcision is an oath, a symbol of the bris, the covenant agreement between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and first Avraham Avinu and subsequently Israel. Bein shetitchadesh hakeshet ata, bein shehaita ma'olam b'teva. It doesn't matter whether rainbows are a, an element of nature, a product of natural laws, or miraculous. It doesn't matter whether the appearance of a rainbow is a miraculous thing above and beyond the laws of nature, or just a simple physical thing following the laws of nature. It doesn't matter in either event. It's an ot sheba, ot acherhu. In any event, it's a symbol of the covenant, the agreement that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made not to destroy the world. So the Ramban doesn't know and doesn't care whether the keshet, a rainbow, is a miraculous manifestation or simply a physical thing following the rules of nature. Now, let's up until this point, we've looked at things from the point of view of the poskim. We've looked at it from the halachic point of view, from the rationalist's point of view. The Shnei Luchot Abrit, Rav Horowitz was his name, originally from Frankfurt in Germany, ended up in Eretz Israel. He was one of the rebbes of the Khatam Sofer. In any event, back in the late 18th century, he was the leading Kabbalist in Europe and also one of the leading poskim. And the sefer we're quoting from was immensely influential, both in the world of Kabbalah and in the world of Halacha. This is what he said. He quotes Rav Moshe Isserles. Moshe Isserles, the same Rav Moshe Isserles who added the Ashkenaz notes on the Shulchan Aruch. Now Rav Moshe Isserles, who added the Ashkenaz notes on the Shulchan Aruch, was not only the greatest of the Ashkenaz poskim, he was also one of the great Mikubalim in the 16th century, in the early first half of the 16th century. Shemati Shama, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles said, Afsha keshet hu b'teva, even though rainbows are an artifact of nature, nothing miraculous, nothing mystical about them, they're just part of nature, even though that's true, Makom makom lo haya nireh hakeshet im hayu zakeim. Nonetheless, the appearance of the keshet occurs only because the Jewish people are lacking merit. Only when the Jewish people do not have any schus, any schut, only when the Jewish people are lacking merit does the rainbow appear. Why? Ki efshar lefi hateva hakeshet ela kisheyered matar bayom. Because rainbows can occur only during daylight. In the middle of the night, there's no such thing as a keshet, a rainbow in the middle of the night. Rainbows occur only when there is daylight, during the day and not at night. And therefore, we know that the appearance of the rainbow is teaching us that the Jewish people are deficient in their zchuyot, deficient in their merits. They're not observing Torah and mitzvahs the way they should. Chamazorachat, the sun is shining when the rainbow comes. Now you're wondering, well, what on earth is he talking about? Just because the sun shines after the rain and there's a rainbow, that that tells us that the Jewish people are not keeping Torah and mitzvahs the way they should. Well, he explains, Ilu hayu zakaim. If the Jewish people had merit, if the Jewish people were keeping Torah and mitzvahs the way they should, lo haya yared mata bayom. It would never rain during the daytime. Ela b'layla. It would rain only at night time. B'shah b'nei adam b'beitam, when people are at home and asleep. If the Jewish people had merit, if they kept the mitzvahs and learned Torah properly, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu would bring the rain. We need rain. We don't need rain during the day when it interferes with our activities. If we were zakai, if we had zchut, if we had the merit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would bring the rain only at night when we're snug in bed. K'mo b'leili Shabbat, like Rashi says, that Geshem be'ito, in Kriya Shema, when we say Geshem be'ito, Geshem at the proper time, Rashi says, what is the proper time for Geshem? At nighttime on Shabbos, when people are not walking about, when people are not going about their business outside. That's the proper time for rain, and that's what it says, Natati gishmechem be'itam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make it rain only when people are indoors at night or on Shabbatot, so people shouldn't get wet and shouldn't be bothered by the rain. That's if we were Zakai, if we would keep Torah and mitzvahs the way we should. So the very fact that it rains during the day is a sign, a warning to the Jewish people that they have to get their acts together and keep Torah and mitzvahs properly. And when you see a rainbow, you are reminded of this. When you see a rainbow, you are reminded that the Jewish people are deficient. Well, we've seen the basic background ideas. Now, let's see the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. Says in the Shulchan Aruch, Haroeh Keshet Omer, if you see a rainbow, you make the following bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, you add the beginning. Hashem, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, even though the Gemara doesn't mention that. Zocher habrit, ne'aman bebrito, v'kayam b'ma'amaro. The Shulchan Aruch combines both of the opinions in the Gemara. There were two opinions in the Gemara about the correct text of the bracha. Well, the Shulchan Aruch says you use both of them. Asur listakel bo biyoter. But it's prohibited to gaze. It is prohibited to look carefully at the rainbow. One should just glance at it in passing. That's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. Now we come to one of the most mysterious passages in the whole of rabbinic literature. Quite a mysterious passage. It's in the Sefer Chayadim, which is one of my favorite handbooks of halacha. It was written by Rav Avram Danzig. Rav Avram Danzig was a dayan in Vilna. We have his dates here, and I give you his dates both in the secular and in the Jewish calendar. I have to keep track for a moment about his dates. He died in 1820, which was the Hebrew year 5681. Now, those were his dates. Hold those dates in mind. They're going to be important in a moment. And in the Chayadim, Muskar, in parentheses, is a parenthetical passage in the Chayadim, which we're about to quote, and it's in parentheses. Here's what it says in parentheses in the Chayadim. Matzati b'sefer echad, Chayadim writes, I found in some sefer, Shmo ne'elam mimeni. I don't remember the name of the sefer. I remember once seeing somewhere, I don't remember where I saw it, she'ein lahagid l'chavero sheyesh keshet. You should never tell anyone that there's a rainbow. If you happen to notice it yourself, you make the bracha. But don't tell anyone, don't attract anyone's attention to the rainbow. Don't tell anyone that the rainbow is there, mitam motzi diba, because that's lashon hara. The rainbow symbolizes the deficiency in Torah and mitzvahs of the Jewish people. After all, if we kept the Torah correctly, they wouldn't rain during the day, and there wouldn't be any rainbows. The very fact that there's a rainbow means it's daytime, means it rains during the day, which means that we're not keeping the Torah and mitzvahs the way we should. And therefore, it's lashon hara to attract anyone's attention to the rainbow. Hey, look at the rainbow, make a bracha. No. If you notice it yourself, make the bracha. But don't attract anyone's attention to it. If no one else notices, all the better, because if you advertise the existence, the presence of the rainbow, you are saying diba lashon hara. Now, at this point, we need a little bit of an understanding of what's going on here. There are two words for lashon hara. Well, lashon hara is one, well, two, lashon hara is itself two words. There are two expressions. There's lashon hara and there's diba. And these two expressions are used more or less interchangeably, and the halachas governing them are the same. In any situation where lashon hara is prohibited, diba is equally prohibited. In any situation where lashon hara is permitted, and there are plenty of situations where lashon hara is not only permitted but obligatory. I remember what Rav Ovadia used to say. Rav Ovadia used to say, it seems to me, he used to say, that more harm is done in the world by people remaining silent when they should speak up with lashon hara and inform people about how wicked so-and-so is. More harm is done by people remaining silent when they should speak up than by lashon hara, than by saying bad things about people. Well, the halachas governing diba and the halachas governing lashon hara are identical. All of which leads to a little bit of confusion. Why do we have two terms? I mean, why do we have two expressions? But there is a difference between the two. The difference between the two is as follows. It's a conceptual difference. In lashon hara, you are offending the person you talk about. You're speaking about someone and you're saying he or she is not a good person. The person being offended is the person you are talking about. That's lashon hara. Diba is a little bit different. In diba, you are not hurting the person you are talking about. In diba, you're injuring, you're harming, you're offending the person you are speaking to, the person you are talking to. You're ruining that person's life. That's diba. For example, dibat haaretz, saying bad things about Eretz. Eretz Israel is stones and rocks. It's earth. Eretz Israel has no feelings one way or another. It's not a person. But if you say bad things about Eretz Israel, the person who is offended is the person you are speaking to. In Dibat Haaretz, when Moshe Rabbeinu sent out the spies to check out Eretz Israel, and they came back to the Midbar, and they said bad things about Eretz Israel, so the Jewish people got depressed. They were saddened. It hurt the Jewish people. It hurt the people that you're speaking to. The poskim go far as to say that telling someone Ploni met, telling someone so and so died, is a violation of diba. By telling someone so-and-so died, you're making them sad. You're making them depressed. It would be better to remain silent. Now, of course, there are some situations in which it's a mitzvah. There are some situations in which a mitzvah falls upon the person when someone died. If someone has mitzvahs to perform because a relative died, you have to bury the person, you have to attend the levaya, you have to make a hesped. If there are mitzvahs to be done, then of course you have to tell the person so and so died, and now you have these mitzvahs upon you. Huh? But someone who's not related, someone who's not part of the family, to tell them that so and so died is only going to depress them, only going to make them sad, mm, and therefore inappropriate. For this reason, many poskim have addressed the question, why, oh why, do we find moda'ot evel? Why, oh why, do we find announcements in the newspaper that so and so has died? The very announcements should be wrong because you're just going to unnecessarily make people sad. Family members have to know about it because they have to bury the deceased. They have all kinds of mitzvahs which apply to them. But public has no reason to tell the public. It's not of any benefit to the public. Just going to make them sad. And the best the poskim can do to justify the moda'ot evel is to say, well, Diba is prohibited in speech, and this is writing. And the Gemara didn't actually prohibit writing, and all the examples in the Torah are not examples of writing, they're all examples of speech. This is the best the poskim can do to justify the moda'ot evel. In any event, according to this parenthetical passage in the Chai Adam, it is a violation of Diba, a violation of Lashon Hara. Shouldn't tell people that there's a rainbow. Come look at the rainbow and make a bracha. You shouldn't say that. Now, as I point out, this parenthetical expression, this parenthetical phrase in parentheses, does not appear in the first edition of the Chai Adam, which was printed in Vilna. The Chai Adam was a dayan in Vilna. The first edition was printed in Vilna in his lifetime, and of course he supervised the printing of the first edition, and this passage does not appear there at all. Nor does it appear in the second edition, which was also published in Vilna while the Chai Adam was still alive, and presumably under his supervision. These parentheses, this parenthetical phrase is not in the second edition either. It first appears in the third edition in Bratislav, quite distant, quite far away from Vilna. Right, Bratislav is right on the border of what is today Slovakia and Germany. This phrase appears first in the Bratislav edition, the third edition, which was published posthumously after the Chai Adam had already passed away, after he had died. And in all subsequent editions, it is printed. So here we have a passage which is a little bit shaky in its provenance, a little bit shaky in how legit it is. It's not in the first edition. It's not in the second edition, both of which were published in the city in the lifetime of the author. It appears first in a third edition, which was printed far away after the author had died. That's one funny. That's one oddity of this phrase. A further oddity is that throughout the whole of the Chai Adam, he never quotes his sources. He never quotes his sources. Instead, he wrote a commentary on his own sefer. Most of the halachot in the Chai Adam come straight out of the Shulchan Aruch. On those halachot, he skipped over in his commentary. He had nothing to say about them. If you want to see commentaries, look at the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. Any halacha in the Chayyim which is not straightly taken, directly taken from the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote his own commentary on why he wrote what he wrote. And on this particular passage, which is clearly not in the Shulchan Aruch, he is silent. Another indication that's not legit. Uh, uh, Nonetheless, it is there from the third edition on, and you buy any copy nowadays and you'll find it. Let's see what the poskim have to say about informing someone that there is a keshet, that there is a rainbow. Mishnah Berurah says, "En kedai lahagid lachavero sheyesh keshet mitam motzi dibo." The Mishnah Berurah seems to embrace the idea within the parentheses, eno kedai, not exactly prohibited. Mishnah Berurah knows how to say things are prohibited when he wants to say things are prohibited, but lo kedai, it's not a good idea, it's not worthwhile. It's better to remain silent and not tell people that there's a keshet, that there's a rainbow. So he acknowledges this passage, does not accept it as halacha psuka, but since the Chayyim said it, or at least it's in the Sefer of the Chayyim, the Mishnah Berurah had no way of knowing that it appeared first in the third edition posthumously. He thought these are the words of the Chayyim, and well, better not to tell someone. Let's look at the Salmus Chaim. Salmus Chaim was written by Rav Sonnenfeld. Rav Sonnenfeld was the founder, one of the founders of the Eda Charedis in Mea Shearim, and he was their first leader, their first diet. He was the great opponent of Rav Kook back in the early days of the opposition between the Zionists and the non-Zionists. Rav Sonnenfeld and Rav Kook, although they were ideological enemies regarding their attitudes towards Zionism, nonetheless, they were personal friends and got along very well and worked very well together on many projects. On any project not having to do with Zionism, they worked together splendidly, although they were ideologically divided on the question of Zionism. So in any event, he wrote, here's the question. Regarding this idea in the Chayyim, which is in parentheses, in the Yoredea section of the Shulchan Aruch, it says, "Nahagu lahodia lebanim zecharim shu to'elet sheyomru kaddish." If a man dies, it's correct to tell the sons that he died, because the sons have a mitzvah to say kaddish. But the daughters and the sisters and the parents, the other relatives, no reason to tell them. Telling them is just going to sadden them, just going to make them depressed. No reason to do that. That would be diba. Im kain, gam bekeshet yesh to'elet. Well, if it's correct to tell the sons of the deceased that so-and-so died so that they can say Kaddish, they'll know this was say Kaddish, shouldn't the same idea apply to a rainbow? Shouldn't it therefore be equally correct to tell people, draw people's attention to the rainbow so that they can make the bracha, just like you draw the attention of the sons to the fact that their father has died so that they can say Kaddish? Go out and advertise. Go out and round up the people. So tell them there's a rainbow, so they can make a bracha. It should be? It should be not only permissible, it should be advisable. That's the question. Tshuva, answer. Pashat, shula to'elet anifta. It's obvious that telling the sons that their father died so that they can say Kaddish has an obvious to'elet, an obvious benefit for the father who died, because it will elevate his soul. We're not allowed to forego giving the deceased father that benefit of elevating his soul. Something nothing to do with rainbows. Halo be'emet efshar devoto rega kvar eino nir. After all, by the time you go to fetch someone to look at the rainbow to make the bracha, by that time the rainbow might have disappeared already. Halo b'chol shmua ra'ot mevarech. And after all, we make brachot even on shmuot ra'ot, even on bad things. It's correct to make brachas. That's what we do when we make a bracha on a rainbow. We're making a bracha on bad tidings, on bad things. B'chol zot nikra motzi diba. And even though it's correct to make a bracha, telling people about it is wrong because you're just going to remind them that they're not zakai, that they don't have the zchut of Torah and mitzvahs. Well, according to the Rav Sonnenfeld, unlike the Mishnah Berurah says kedai, it'd be better to remain silent and not tell people about the rainbow. Rav Sonnenfeld in the Psalmist Chaim says you definitely should not tell people. You should definitely refrain from that. Well, let's take a look at what the Rishonim have to say. Sefer Chassid, written by Rav Yehuda HaChassid, this is centuries before the Baal Shem Tov. This has nothing to do with the Hasidic movement founded by the Baal Shem Tov. Rav Yehuda HaChassid was the founder of a movement which is called by historians Hasidei Ashkenaz, the 13th and 14th century Hasidim in Germany. He, Rav Yehuda HaChassid, was one of the Balei Tosafot, and the Sefer Hasidim that we're about to quote from has immense influence on subsequent generations in Halacha. Echad haya b'vet knesset. Someone was in the shul. Lecha shekvar amru kadosh kadosh kadosh. They finished. They're in the middle of, the davening Shacharis. The repetition of the Shemona Esrei has already started, and at least the Kedusha has finished. Now the Chazan, the Shliach Tzibur, is continuing the repetition of the Shemona Esrei. Baruch Kvod Hashem, he finished that already. Yimloch Hashem L'olam Ved, finished that already. Atzof Bracha Hakel HaKadosh. The Chazan already finished the bracha and said Hakel HaKadosh. At this point, after the Chazan finished Hakel HaKadosh, in the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, someone burst into the shul and called out, Keshet nireh ba'anan. There's a rainbow outside. Now, what should the people in the shul do? They're in the middle of listening to the repetition of the Shemona Esrei. The most important part, Kedusha, has already been finished, but there's a lot still to go. Yetzei b'beit HaKnesset, you should leave the synagogue, Bereich ala keshet, and make the bracha. That's what Sefer Hasidim says you should do. Now think about it for a moment. The Sefer Hasidim clearly thinks there was nothing wrong. The guy who burst into the synagogue and called out, there's a keshet, there's a rainbow outside, come and make the bracha. That guy apparently did nothing wrong. On the contrary, he informed the people that they have the opportunity to make a bracha. The Sefer Hasidim seems to be approving of spreading the word, publicizing that there is a rainbow. Amrulo, but there's a little problem here. Why is it permissible to leave the shul in the middle of the repetition of the Shemona Esrei? The rule is, ha'osek mitzvah potem en mitzvah. Anyone who is engaged in the performance of a mitzvah, any mitzvah that you are performing, you are exempt from every other mitzvah in the Torah. For example, if you are taking care of some lost property, you found some property, someone lost something. You take it into your house, you put up signs around, you're trying to find whoever it belongs to, and this is going on for days and weeks and months and years. You're trying to find who this property belongs to, and there are two kinds of property that you might have found. Some kinds of property are durable, just put them in a cabinet, they'll last forever. And if ever the person shows up and can identify it, so you'll fork it over to that person. There are other kinds of property you might find that are not durable. You have to take care of them. And if you don't take care of them on a regular basis, they will spoil, they will rot, they will go bad. The example of the Gemara is a talus, a woolen talus. You find a woolen talus, it could be a garment. You find a woolen garment that someone lost, take it to your house, advertise that you found it. You wait days, weeks, months, years until someone hopefully will show up and identify it, and then you'll fork it over. But meanwhile, if you just fold up the garment and put it in the cupboard, moths will come and ruin it. Once a month, you have to take it out of the cabinet, shake it out, air it out, then put it back in the cabinet so that moths will not come and ruin it. That's part of the mitzvah of returning lost property, is taking care of it until a person shows up and you can return it, unless it's a durable thing, which will last forever without care. Now, while you are engaged in the mitzvah of shaking it out, airing it out, and putting it back, you're now engaged in the mitzvah. You are exempt from every other mitzvah of the Torah. The Gemara goes so far as to present the following example. What about a man like me? At the moment, I am performing the mitzvah of wearing a talus cotton. Well, I'm in the middle of performance of a mitzvah. Should I not therefore be exempt from every other mitzvah of the Torah? If a poor person knocks on the door begging, why should I do the mitzvah of tzedakah? I am currently engaged in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Well, this principle seems to apply in the synagogue case as well. People are engaged in the mitzvah of davening. They're listening to the repetition of Shemona Esrei. They should be exempt from the bracha on the rainbow, even if there's a big window and you see the rainbow from inside the shul. Well, you're doing a different mitzvah at the moment. La'an hadvarim magi'im. I'll give you my favorite story. Here's my favorite story. The Chofetz Chaim, at the end of his life, was not well and more or less confined to his home. And he always had two bachurim from the yeshiva taking care of him in his house. One afternoon, he took a nap. He took a nap every afternoon, woke up from his nap, looked around, and he did not see the two bachurim who were taking care of him. There's a schedule. They kept changing the whole schedule of which bachurim would take care of the Chofetz Chaim on a daily basis. The bachurim weren't there. When he woke up from his nap, he looked around and he asked the non-Jewish maid who was in charge of cleaning the house. He asked her, "Gdzie bachurim? Where are the bachurim who are supposed to be taking care of me?" And she said, "Oh, they went to the prayers in the synagogue. They went to daven mincha." To which he said, "Zakein v'cholah." They have the mitzvah of taking care of a zakein v'choleh. They have the mitzvah of taking care of me, an old and sick person. Why on earth did they abandon that mitzvah to go to the synagogue to pray? They're exempt from all other mitzvahs while they are taking care of me, zakein v'choleh. So the same principle applies in the case at hand. Here they are in the synagogue, engaged in one mitzvah. They should be exempt from the mitzvah of reciting a blessing on the rainbow. You're saying, you're doing the mitzvah of saying Amen at the end of every bracha of the Shliach Tzibur. Amar, Zot bracha adifa mipnei she'overet. No, the psak of the Sefer Hasidim, Rav Yaakov, the founder of Hasidut Ashkenaz, said, no, if you have a mitzvah overet, a passing mitzvah, which has to be that you won't have another opportunity to do it, then it's correct to abandon your current mitzvah and fulfill the passing mitzvah, which if you don't grasp the opportunity, you won't have time to do it. You won't have an opportunity to do it later. But the reason I quote the story is because you notice in passing, in hearing the story and reading the story, that the Sefer Hasidim approves of spreading the word and advertising that the rainbow is available. Rav Ovadia Yosef, one of the great names of modern times, he quotes the Sefer Brit Kahuna, written by Rav Chalfon Moshe. Rav Chalfon Moshe, he was the Rosh Yeshiva in Jerba. He died in the late 1930s, early 1940s. In any event, he writes, "Haminhag pashut shekol haroeh keshet ba'anan omer lechavero kedei levarech birkat hakeshet." The minhag, the practice is, in fact, what's going on in Jerba is anyone who sees a mitzvah tells all the other Jews, "Hey, there's a rainbow. Come and make the bracha." Look at the Chayei. This parenthetical phrase in the Chayei is simply we ignore it. Adrabah, on the contrary, Anu notnim todah ubracha leKadosh Baruch Hu asher b'chasto karad brit. We want to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the brit, for the covenant, for God's agreement not to destroy the world again. That calls for a hoda'ah, thanksgiving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzvei adif la'agid luzulato. And therefore, it's advisable to tell people that the rainbow is there. Kedesha achai yitena libo, so that people will see the rainbow and remember that they have to do tshuva. Dvarav nechonim, Rav Ovadia Yosef, Somech Shtei Yadayim, he embraces and agrees with the position of Rav Chalfon Moshe, the Rosh Yeshiva in Jerba entirely. We cannot follow this parenthetical expression of the Chayei. We have to tell people when we see a rainbow. The last opinion for today is that of the Or L'Tzion, Rav Ben-Zion Abba Shaul. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Porat Yosef here in Yerushalayim, passed away around 15 years ago. He was asked, Ketzad Mevarchin et Kol HaBrachot HaPratiyot. The Gemara mentions a lot of brachas. The bracha on Keshet is just one of many brachas. You see the oceans, you make this bracha. You see the mountains, you say that bracha. You see your friend whom you haven't seen in a long time, you make this bracha. There are many examples of brachas to be pronounced upon seeing this or seeing that. Kagon al broken, raimim. You see lightning, you hear thunder. There are brachas to be recited, like for the rainbow. Al hayamim, oceans and rivers also get brachas. Well, in each case, chaim b'shem malchus or b'lo shem malchus, the Gemara always omits the beginning of the bracha, the Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech olam part. The Gemara only mentions the end of the bracha. Are we to understand, like the Shulchan Aruch taught us, that you're supposed to insert the Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech olam at the beginning, or are we to say it exactly like it is in the Gemara without that introduction? Tshuva. Kol habrachot ha'elu me'ikar hadin tzarich levarcham b'shem malchus. Of course, you have to say Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech olam just like the Shulchan Aruch paskins. בכל מקום, יש מקומות שנהגו לברך אלו על חלקם בלא שמעו מלכוס. But there are people out there who are omitting the introduction of the bracha, and they're just saying Zocher Habris and not the Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam part. Kol echad yinhag keminhag makamo. If you live in a place, in a time where they're abbreviating the bracha, so abbreviate it. Misha Eilo Bazeh Minhag Bo, but if you don't have a clear local minhag which should obligate you, it's correct to make the bracha with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. Even someone who in the past has omitted God's name in these brachot and now wants to start using them, well, it's correct to start using God's name in these brachos. There are places, there are communities where they omit the name of God. The reason that they do that is because they're afraid that in certain circumstances, the bracha might not really be called for. For example, la'achad toch kedei dibur. For example, how quickly do you have to say the bracha upon citing, upon seeing whatever it is that calls for the bracha? Some people might think, and there's some reason to think, if you don't say the bracha immediately, toch kedei dibur, then it's too late to recite the bracha. So there are people who, because of this idea, refrain from using God's name. Well, bottom line, the text of the bracha is correct with God's name. The only people who should really omit it are the people who live in a place and time where the minhag hamakom is not to use God's name. So, in any event, I'm going to pause with this and ask you if you have any questions you want to ask.
Sorry, yeah, I did miss a bit, so I'm not sure if you
I don't
dealt
hear
with
you.
it.
Is that my problem? I don't hear.
Can you hear me now?
No, don't hear a thing. No, other people
No?
hear?
No, no?
Oh, so it's my problem? Good grief. Okay, what can we do?
Can
Maybe
you hear me? You
oh,
did?
now I hear you. Now I hear you. Yes. Now
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this was dealt with because I did miss a little bit. But in terms of the full rainbow and the partial rainbow,
we did not discuss this. I intend to discuss this next week.
okay. So then we should
Yeah, the
not
answer
see
is
any half rainbows.
most poskim are going to say even if you don't see a whole rainbow, but even if you only see part, but that deserves a separate discussion next week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other issues? No. Okay, then I wish you a good week and a safe week and a good Shabbos, and look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Bye.